Hey friends, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we're going to talk about Bernie Sanders. We're going to talk about Democratic Socialism. We're going to talk about negative versus positive liberty. And before we do that, though, I want to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com so you can get all of our latest content. Make sure you're getting, everything we're working on here. We got a lot of things happening here at the Conscious Resistance, and I want to make sure that you guys are plugged in properly. And of course, the key thing that I want you to do is to, go over to our website, which you can see right here, and make sure that you have bookmarked it, as I said, but also make sure that you are, you're signing up on Minds.com, you're on Steemit, join our Discord channel, click this little cloud and join our Remind text list. Patreon if you want to support. We're also on BitChute. And if you want to support our partner, My Brave Botanicals, you can click on the button right here, and that does help me as well as them and you because you get a free ounce of kratom. All right, so yesterday, Bernie Sanders gave a speech on democratic socialism. This is, of course, part of his ongoing campaign for president, which, is not really a really important topic in my view, who's running for president. But I did think it offered an opportunity to speak on some important philosophical differences between Bernie Sanders and, I guess, a more freedom-minded philosophy. Some would call it libertarianism, anarchism, agorism. But let's go ahead and listen to the first couple of minutes of Bernie Sanders' talk, because actually this is where I think he's right on some issues. So let's check out the first couple minutes, and then we'll talk about where he's wrong.
Thank you all very much for being here. And let me begin by saying, my friends, we are in the midst of a defining and pivotal moment for our country and the planet. And with so many crises converging upon us simultaneously, it is easy for us to become overwhelmed or depressed, or even to throw up our hands in resignation. But my message to you today is that if there was ever a moment in the history of our country where despair was not an option, this is that time.
I totally agree with that.
If there was ever a moment where we had to effectively analyze the competing political and social forces which define this historical period, this is that time. If there was ever a moment when we needed to stand up and fight against the forces of oligarchy and authoritarianism, this is that time.
Again, I agree with that. We might disagree who the oligarchs and authoritarians are, though.
And if there was ever a moment when we needed a new vision to bring our people together in the fight for justice, decency, and human dignity, this is that time.
All right. Again, I agree with that. So he's calling out oligarchs. He's calling out authoritarianism. And I think let me just see if he says anything else that I agree with here.
In the year 2019, the United States and the rest of the world face two very different political paths. On one hand, there is a growing movement toward oligarchy and authoritarianism, in which a small number of incredibly wealthy and powerful billionaires own and control a significant part of the economy and exert enormous influence over the political life of our country. On the other hand, in opposition to oligarchy, there is a movement of working people and young people who, in ever-increasing numbers, are fighting for justice. They are...
All right, so we'll stop it there, because the reality of this is what I want to say to you guys before we move on to where I think Bernie Sanders is incorrect in my view, and the big philosophical difference between people like him and people like myself. The reality is that he does touch on a lot of important issues, that there is an oligarch class, that, you know, some call deep state, shadow government. There is authoritarian influence and political ideology within governments. I'd say it's the government itself. But of course, Bernie Sanders, while he's right in that instance, as I've said in past videos about Bernie Sanders back in 2016, he is incorrect when it comes to solutions. You know, he thinks that the answer is more government and things of that sort. He promotes, and this speech is focused on him defending what he calls democratic socialism, which, by the way, he gave a very vague kind of overview of. Basically he's saying, like, where people have a right to free education, or people have a right to a living wage, and people have a right to as much education as they want, and they have a right to this. You know, that's what he calls democratic socialism, and you know, justice and the things of that sort. But when you look at the philosophy, and this is of course Wikipedia, and this is sourced from different democratic socialist authors and websites and stuff, so I think it's fairly reliable, or at least as reliable as Wikipedia is. It's described as a political philosophy that advocates political democracy alongside a socially owned economy. So socially owned, that means owned by the state, with an emphasis on self-management and democratic management of economic institutions within a market or some form of decentralized planned socialist economy. So they claim it would be some type of market or decentralized socialist economy, which kind of, it's like an oxymoron, because how can you be decentralized if it's socialist owned, which means state owned? You know, they call it people owned, but it typically ends up, as we know through history, owned by the state and loss of liberties. Democratic socialists argue that capitalism is inherently incompatible with what they hold to be democratic values of liberty, equality, and solidarity, and that these ideals can only be achieved through the realization of a socialist society. And they either support revolutionary, i.e. violent overthrow, or reformist policies. And this adjective is democratic is used to distinguish democratic socialists from Marxist-Leninist-inspired socialism, which has been viewed as non-democratic or authoritarian in practice. And democratic socialists oppose the Stalinist political system and the Soviet-type economic system, rejecting the authoritarian form of governance and highly centralized command economy that took form in the Soviet Union and in Marxist-Leninist states throughout the 20th century. So they're like, we're the different socialists. We're more democratic. We don't want to be authoritarian. It's not going to turn out that way. We're okay with some type of market economy. And then you also have social democracy, social democrats, which they describe as a political, social, and economic philosophy that supports economic and social intervention, so state intervention in the economy and in social life, to promote social justice with the framework of a liberal democratic polity and a capitalist mixed economy. The protocols and norms used to accomplish this involve a commitment to representative and participatory democracy, income redistribution, and regulation of the economy in the general interest and welfare state. So essentially what it comes down to is both models, whether you call yourself a democratic socialist or a social democrat, it involves some level of state control of the economy and of social intervention in social life in order to enact what they call liberty, equality, solidarity, and social justice. So that gives you kind of an overview. Now, I do think that the criticisms that many of you may have for yourself that say, oh, these are the same old socialists just trying to rebrand it. Well, in one instance, that's true, because yes, they are trying to distinguish themselves and distance themselves from the authoritarian Marxist-Leninists, the Maos and the Stalins and the Lenins and things of that sort, and say that they're different. Now, those of you who've been following me for a long time, and those who I think are anarchist or more libertarian-minded, you understand that power corrupts. And so when you have a giant federal government, centralized power, you can say it's going to be a democratic socialist, or it's going to be a democratic fascist, or a democratic, this or that, whatever. But at the end of the day, these institutions are going to want more and more power, and the people at the top are going to benefit from, the fruits of the labor of the rest of the people. So I don't really buy this. Now, even if he has good intentions, I think that he is ignoring the facts that, these institutions, these governments turn authoritarian. Now, I don't want to focus on just democratic socialism. I think that there's a more key element here that displays the difference between somebody like Bernie Sanders and somebody like myself and those who actually care about liberty. Now, of course, democratic socialists say they care about liberty, equality, and solidarity. So what are they meaning by that? Well, here's where Bernie Sanders lays out exactly what he means by liberty. So just listen to this for just a couple minutes, and then we'll come back.
What I believe is that the American people deserve freedom, true freedom. Freedom is an often used word, but it is time that we took a hard look at what that word actually means. Ask yourself, what does it really mean to be free? Are you truly free if you are unable to go to a doctor when you are sick, or face financial bankruptcy when you leave the hospital? Are you truly free if you cannot afford the prescription drugs you need in order to stay alive? Are you truly free when you spend half of your limited income on housing and are forced to borrow money from a payday lender at 200% interest rates? Are you truly free if you are 70 years old and forced to work because you lack a pension or enough money to retire? Are you truly free if you are unable to go to a college or a trade school because your family lacks the income? Are you truly free if you are forced to work 60 or 80 hours a week because you cannot find a job that pays you a living wage? Are you truly free if you are a mother with a newborn baby, but you are forced to go back to work immediately after the birth of that child because you lack paid family leave?
All right, so I think you guys are getting the point here. Now, you can see that he's saying, are you truly free if, somebody's not taking care of you when you're old? Are you truly free if you can't afford to go to school? Are you truly free if you got to borrow money, if these different things, right? Now, without speculating on these different examples he'd give, and I'd say that, what it really comes down to, there's two key concepts, and I've talked about this before. There are two key concepts which separate those who tend to be on the left and even those on the right, because there's statists and authoritarians on the left and the right. But I'd say those of that statist, authoritarian, even those who are benevolent like Bernie Sanders, who think that they're doing good, who separate those folks from those of us who believe in individual liberty, often termed libertarians or anarchists or whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. Now, the crux of that, I would say, is something known as positive versus negative liberty. Now, what Bernie Sanders was just describing is a great example of positive liberty. Positive liberty is this concept that, individuals should be free to have. I think this is a really simple way to say it. You should be free to have. You should be free to have, like in their terms, their liberty, like you just said. Are you truly free if you don't have a living wage? Are you truly free if the state's not taking care of you and giving you a pension to make sure you can retire at an appropriate age, whatever they deem that to be? Are you truly free if the state's not subsidizing you so you don't have to take out payday loans, even if maybe you made bad decisions and it's your actions that led to you being in that position? Either way, he thinks that the government, the state, is a tool to enact what he calls liberty, equality, and solidarity, right? So that's positive liberty, the freedom to have things and to have a living wage, to have free college, to have Medicare for all these kinds of things. And some people, again, think that that is the role of the government. The state should be doing those things. The state, since it's taxing us all, even though we know taxation is extortion and it's organized and legalized theft, but it's still immoral. But some folks say, well, if they're going to do that, then they should use those funds to take care of society, right? This collective good. Now, that's positive liberty. Negative liberty, which I don't even really like, the positive negative framing, but this is how it's typically described. Negative liberty is what we would know more as the freedom to be free from obstruction. So right here, according to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, negative liberty is the absence of obstacles, barriers, or constraint. One has negative liberty to the extent that actions are available to one in this negative sense. So this means we want to be free from surveillance. We want to be free from government intrusion in our lives. We want to be free from being molested by governments if we want to do business. We want to be free from forced taxation. So that's negative, what they call is known philosophically as negative liberty. So the freedom to be free from things, free from harm, free from interference, free from violence, free from coercion. And again, positive liberty is the possibility of acting, or the fact of acting, in such a way to take control of one's lives and realize one's fundamental purposes. I don't really like how they frame that, because I think that you could say that about negative liberty too. It's taking control of your own life and with that, and being free from interference. While negative liberty is usually attributed to individual agents, positive liberty is sometimes attributed to collectivities or individuals considered primarily as members of given collectivities. Now, that is another crux of this, okay? So some who tend to be on the left and be in favor of big government or socialism or these kinds of things, they want positive liberty. They want the government to dish out their quote-unquote liberties or freedoms to make sure everybody is free to have healthcare, free to have college, free to have this, free to have that, right? And a welfare state to fund it, forced taxation to fund it. If you don't like it, you must hate the poor. That kind of mentality. And then the other side is negative liberty, freedom to be free from harm, free from interference. Let's take care of ourselves. Let's get the government out of our lives. So those are two key components that I do think tend to divide people. And you'll hear this in conversations if you think about it when you meet somebody and listen to what they're describing, what they're saying. Go beyond just like, oh, you're a socialist or you're a liberal or you're a Democrat or you're a conservative Republican, but listen to the philosophy behind what they're saying. And beyond just the negative and positive liberty, the folks who believe in positive liberty, they tend to believe in collectivism as well. Like this said, it's negative liberty is usually attributed to individual agents. So negative liberty tend to be associated with individualism and with recognizing that the individual is the minority that is under threat the most. And so they take that standpoint and recognize the power of individuals. Now, that doesn't mean we don't believe in groups or collectives, but it doesn't forego the power of the individual in order for some greater good. While those who believe in positive liberty, they tend to believe in collective good, right? So you'll hear these arguments. They're saying, well, I don't care if you're forced to pay taxes. Yeah, maybe that is wrong, but if it helps everybody else, it's for the greater good, right? So that's, again, that more left-leaning mentality. So we have two big distinctions here. And I just thought that the Bernie Sanders speech is a really great example to bring this out, because these people who are cheering him, they obviously believe in what they call positive liberty. So they believe in the state funding these programs through forced taxation. He doesn't mention any of that. And I'm going to post this link below so you can kind of get a deeper look into this concepts. But that's what it comes down to, is positive liberty and collectivist worldview, and negative liberty and an individualist worldview. Those are the two, I think, big distinctions between what we face in the world philosophically. This is a pretty good article from libertarianism.org, What Are Negative and Positive Liberty and Why Does It Matter? And you can read that. I'll post these links below. And then, of course, I'll post a link to the Bernie Sanders speech if you want to hear it. It's about 45 minutes long. I don't think he says a whole lot. I think that you can learn more about democratic socialism by reading the Wikipedia page and following some of the links, because he didn't really get into specifics. He kind of was vague and said, Martin Luther King this, and equality and liberty and justice. So that's the democratic socialism I believe in. He did make a good point, I will say, just side note, that he called out Donald Trump, saying, hey, Donald Trump believes in socialism. He just believes in corporate socialism, as do most Republicans. That's the thing, is most Republicans, right-leaning people, they'll call out the left and say, oh, they want socialism, they want to distribute the wealth. But then the other side, the right-leaning people, tend to do the same exact thing with their buddies. They're all for corporate welfare and corporate socialism. So they're both socialists of different kinds. They're both authoritarians of different kinds. Some, and they all think that they're benevolent. That's how tyrannical leaders are. They all think that they have the good of everybody in mind. They just have different tactics and methods to achieve it. So what do you guys think? Have you heard of positive and negative liberty before? Do you think there's any major difference between social democracy and democratic socialism and the authoritarian socialism that we've seen in the past? Or is it all a smokescreen? I'm more interested, though, in the philosophical discussion here. I've always been fascinated by the ideas of positive and negative liberty, because I don't think most people are even aware of these terms and really think about them. They just know, like, oh, I want poor people to be taken care of. I wish there weren't people suffering, and that's an emotional response. Look, I live in Houston. There's tons of poor people. There's definitely income inequality and disparity of wealth going on in the city. But I know that the answer isn't to just say, let's empower the government to take more from other people to try to fix the problem. So although Bernie Sanders may have the understanding of some of the problems, as I've said now for 3 or 4 years, talking about Bernie Sanders here and there, he's wrong when it comes to the solutions. He doesn't understand the true solutions that matter. And it probably would take, unfortunately, there's a lot of young-minded people who believe that this is the answer, because they're growing up with college debt that's, they're drowning in college debt. They can't move out of their parents' home. They can't save any money. They're looking for a job just to scrape by. It's becoming harder and harder just to live in Houston. I've been looking for a new place, and there aren't very many places for people who are in their 20s and 30s who don't make a lot of money and who are just surviving check to check. You know, the average person here is just one messed up paycheck away from being on the street. And that's the reality. So stepping into that reality are people like Bernie Sanders and others promising to fix everything through government. And that sounds a lot more appealing to some people than saying, no, we're going to decentralize the government and you're going to take care of yourself. You guys are going to have to work hard and build community and come together for solutions instead of the government just handing it to you. Because, well, the reality is once the government gets involved and they start messing with the economy and centralizing things, things get fucked up. Everything gets screwed up. So we don't want that. And that's all I wanted to say today, guys. I thought it was an interesting opportunity to talk about positive versus negative liberty. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments below. Have you read about positive, negative liberty? Do you prefer positive liberty? Do you prefer negative liberty? Do you see the limitations and the problems with positive liberty that I've outlined, or you think I'm incorrect? I'd love to hear your thoughts either way. I do want to say, though, guys, that I've been on YouTube. I've been getting notifications for comments, and I go here, and, you know, like this one right here. That's why I trust your work, because of your investigative nature. And then when I look into it, the comment's not there. That's happened to this one. Really appreciate your work. When can I, you know, so there's just been several comments over the last few days that I get notifications for, and when I click on them, they're gone. So I'm not ignoring you. I'm definitely not deleting any comments, but I do think YouTube is back to its old tricks. They're throttling my traffic. They're making sure people aren't seeing my notifications. Again, I invite you to join our Remind text list, because you will get a text message right to your phone every time I release a new video, and you don't have to rely on YouTube. And you can, of course, join Discord and watch the videos through there. You can join BitChute and watch the videos through there. You can join Steemit and watch the videos through there. All right, guys. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free, my friends. Peace.